It's December 1942. Somewhere over the Solomon Islands, a 19-year-old waist gunner named Eddie Kowalski is gripping his Browning M2 machine gun in the belly of a B-17 bomber. The engines roar and the plane vibrates violently under the assault of gunfire and enemy aircraft. Eddie spots a Japanese Zero closing fast at around 300 yards. His instincts scream to fire. He lines up the crosshairs, squeezes the trigger, and 50 rounds burst from the barrel. The tracer fire illuminates the sky, but every single bullet misses. Not a single hit. The enemy plane sails past without taking any evasive action. This wasn't Eddie's failure. This was the nightmare faced by thousands of American gunners throughout World War II. No matter how well trained, no matter how motivated, they were missing their targets constantly. But why? And what could be done about it? In early 1943, after a series of disastrous bombing missions, the Army Air Forces conducted a study analyzing gun camera footage from combat over Europe and the Pacific. The findings were staggering. Aerial gunners were hitting their targets less than 4% of the time. That's right, out of every 100 rounds fired at enemy aircraft moving across the sky, only 4 rounds hit their target, and most of those missed completely. So why was this happening? Let's break this down. American gunners were armed with the best machine guns available, the Browning M2 50 caliber, a weapon capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. That's about 13 rounds every second. In a typical engagement that lasted only 8 to 12 seconds, a gunner could send 130 rounds towards the target. But with the 4% hit rate, only about 5 of those bullets would land. 5 bullets. That's not even close to enough to bring down a rugged enemy plane like the Japanese Zero or the German Focke-Wulf FW-190, both of which could withstand a lot of fire and keep flying. The math? It was brutal. And the human cost was staggering. The 8th Air Force in Europe lost an average of 188 bombers each month in 1943, and with each bomber, an entire crew of 10 men could be wiped out. That's 1,880 airmen killed, captured, or missing every single month. A huge part of those losses came from bomber formations that simply couldn't defend themselves against attacking fighters. So, what was going wrong? Here's where the physics comes into play. Gunners were aiming directly at what they saw. And that makes sense, right? If you're shooting at something, you aim at it. But enemy fighters weren't like slow-moving targets on the range. They were zipping by at speeds upwards of 300 miles per hour, faster than the gunners could process. Take a Japanese Zero, for example. A Zero flying at 300 miles per hour covers about 440 feet every second. If the gunner is shooting at a target 300 yards away, the Zero is already 136 feet ahead by the time the bullet even reaches where the target was. This is what's called deflection error. The problem? Gunners were aiming where the target was, not where it was going. The math here is intense. A B-17 gunner needed to aim 15 to 20 feet ahead of the target to hit it, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on speed and other factors. But this wasn't something they could calculate in the heat of battle, not under pressure. Not while fighting off enemy planes in flak at 25,000 feet in freezing conditions. And the worst part? No one had figured this out yet. Aerial gunnery training was stuck in the past. It was focused on stationary targets, on slow-moving towed targets, nothing that simulated the chaos of real combat. To make things worse, gunners who survived a few missions often abandoned the idea of deflection shooting. Why? Failure. After firing a burst and missing completely, many gunners would think they had aimed too far ahead, so they would self-correct in the wrong direction, aiming closer to the target the next time. This led to even more missed shots, and the deadly cycle continued. Across the Atlantic, the Royal Air Force was dealing with similar issues. They also realized that their pilots were missing their targets at high speeds. But instead of complex calculations, they tried something more intuitive. Squadron leader Horace Darley had an idea. What if pilots didn't calculate the deflection at all? What if they just trusted their instincts and aimed at where the target would be? The first results weren't great, but after lots of practice, the RAF pilots started improving. They went from a 6% hit rate to 12%, and while that might sound small, in combat, that was a game changer. Back in the Pacific, American gunners were still facing the same issues, but this time, the breakthrough came from the combat gunners themselves. Staff Sergeant William Fleming, a waist gunner aboard the USS Lexington, had flown 31 combat missions. He didn't have a background in ballistics or math, but after seeing so many failed engagements, he started recording where he aimed during successful shots. He made sketches and notes, marking how many aircraft lengths ahead of the target he aimed. Fleming's method was simple but effective. Use the size of the enemy plane as a visual reference and aim a specific number of plane lengths ahead of it. By March 14, 1944, Fleming presented his method to Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, a Medal of Honor recipient. O'Hare immediately saw the potential and ordered that it be implemented across the fleet. The results? By April 1944, gunners were now hitting 9.1 times for every 100 rounds fired, nearly double their previous success rate. Fleming's instant-based spot shooting method became the standard across the Pacific Fleet. By mid-1944, the U.S. Army Air Forces adopted similar techniques, and hit rates skyrocketed. The 8th Air Force's mission loss rates dropped significantly from 5.2% in October 1943 to 3.4% by July 1944. The difference was staggering. Hundreds of airmen who would have died now returned home safely. The lessons learned from World War II didn't stop there. As technology advanced, these principles of deflection shooting laid the foundation for modern fire control systems. In the Korean War, the technology evolved into computerized systems that calculated deflection in real time. Today, fighter jets like the F-22 Raptor use radar to predict a target's future position and adjust the aim automatically, down to the millisecond. The legacy of the deflection shooting breakthrough is clear. Humans can overcome instinct and adapt with the right knowledge, the right training, and the right technology. The gunners who fought in World War II learned that lesson in the heat of combat, and that lesson has shaped air combat ever since. What started as a frustrating problem over the skies of Europe and the Pacific became a revolution in warfare. A revolution that would continue to evolve and influence the very nature of combat today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell for more deep dives into the history of warfare and technological breakthroughs. See you next time.